wait. And baby, I'm TFC till I die.
Hello and welcome back to Toronto Till I Die, the Toronto FC fan show. I'm Mike Newell, and oh, what a feeling. John Herdman made the rounds at BMO Field, the DPs DP'd, and Toronto FC finally, for the first time since May 27th, processed a 3-1 win over the Philadelphia Union. In the process, getting Terry Dunfield his first ever professional management win. So the vibes are strong here on Toronto Till I Die today. No more dour Mike and Jeff. As you can see, no Mike saying, but we, of course, have John Molinaro back on the show with us this week. We will be reveling in that 3-1 win. We'll be talking a little bit about the importance of John Herdman and Jason Hernandez's staff now that we have a head coach. What about the rest of those positions? We'll be going into a little bit of a short little mailbag with JMO. And then, of course, we will wrap up with the burning question presented by Nextdoor. As we get into it, before we get into the big, heavy-hitting items of the day, John, we normally do something called Food Corner here on the show before we really dig into the meat of the show. And usually it's me bringing up stuff that I've been eating over the last week, and then the other guys jump in. You, of course, beyond being the founder and editor of TFC Republic and being a longtime Toronto FC beat reporter, also put down really great tweets with your dinners, which are usually fantastic and make me very jealous, and usually are like, why didn't I make that? So the question for you, John, is what you been eating? What's sort of been on the menu for Mr. Molinaro the last couple of days?
Well, today, because I happen to grow my own basil on my balcony, and today I picked like the last of it. So I made a fresh pesto with pappardelle pasta, which was
bellissimo.
Really well. Turned out really well. So I was pretty pleased with it.
Nice. Awesome. I went with a little bit of a paella. Now, I don't have a proper paella pan, but I do use a skillet. Turned out okay. I didn't do shrimp this time, which I know is a sin. I know someone out there is going to be roasting me for not using shrimp in my paella, but my wife doesn't like it. So, but it turned out okay. I didn't also have saffron because saffron is so expensive. Like, it's ridiculously expensive.
It's an expensive spice, but it's well worth it if you can make the investment. Can I make a suggestion, Mike, for paella next time? Try, get fresh rabbit meat if you can and use that, because that's fantastic.
John, I don't live in the luxurious world of media writing. Chicken, we can get some sausage, some chorizo, rabbit meat.
It's not that hard. I mean, you live in Hamilton, right? You can go to the Hamilton Farmers Market and probably get like a nice rabbit loin there. So.
I could.
But you won't.
I might have to now. I might have to explain this on
and
the
report back.
Budget. What do you mean we're short on the budget? Wait, because you got rabbit meat? Oh, great. So anyway, Jeff, before we get into it too, what's on your menu before we wrap? We'll wrap up.
Well, first I got a question. Paella with shrimp, heads included, or heads come off the shrimp?
No, we don't do the head. Tara doesn't do the heads. So no heads.
Yeah. What about you, John? You like eating those heads?
I do. I mean, yeah. I mean, I have a proper paella pan too. So I mean, I haven't made it.
Of course you do. Yeah.
But I should probably have a go at it because it's been, it's been a long time since I made paella.
There you go.
What am I eating? I mean, the huge, certainly around the homestead, but I did have a pickleback corn dog explode all over me prior to the Philly game when I went to eat it at the CNE. Those things should come with a warning label. It was like magma level, like that pickle juice could melt lead. And in addition to like the proper 3rd degree burns all down my arm, I smelt like pickle juice for the duration of the Philadelphia game. So yeah, big mistake. But I didn't I didn't go for the cheeseburger ice cream because I'm not a masochist. Well, I'm not that much of a masochist. He says after
And you don't
eats
want to
the
wait
pickle
in
dog.
line that long. That's ridiculous. That line
Oh,
is
there
nuts.
weren't. The lines weren't that long. There were a lot of places around the general concourse that were selling the cheeseburger ice cream. It's just gross. Let's be honest. It's super, super, super gross. So I didn't eat it. I'm not one of those people that has to have all the new hotness at the CNE because I've been burned literally many times before. So yeah, pickle dog and out. That was it.
Yeah, and it leads really into sort of my next question. Again, keeping it light before we get into the show and get into the revelry
Mm.
of a win. How do you feel about C&E games? Because at first when we started having them, I liked them, and then I realized, wait, I don't actually love massive crowds and trying to fight my way to my gate to try to get in and out of the stadium. I don't know how you guys feel. JMO, obviously you do this from a reporting perspective. You're in the booth. What is that sort of C&E experience like for you to try to get to where you need to get to? Because I have come to kind of despise it a little bit. Though it's beautiful on TV and the shots are great with the midway and the rides lit up at night and stuff. That looks awesome. I get that. But everything else, I'm just kind of over it.
Yeah, it kind of complicates my day a little bit. I mean, it's, once you get into the Liberty Village, it probably adds on another 5-10 minutes to my day in terms of just getting to the ground and getting upstairs. But I mean, I'm not going to sort of sweat it too much. I mean, I'm like you. I don't particularly care for it. I mean, I don't particularly like big crowds. I mean, the X is something I did when I was a kid, and that's certainly not. I don't do anything anymore. Maybe if I've had kids, I would go. But yeah, I mean, it's an annoyance. But for 2 games out of the year, I can live with it. It's not the end of the world.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, guys, let's move on. 3-1 win, Toronto FC over the Philadelphia Union. Where did that come from? Because I'm pretty sure last week on the show, I think the three of you were like, there's no way this team is going to pull out a win against a team that's second in the Eastern Conference.
Enthusiastically, euphemistically, enthusiastically. I mean,
Basically.
the John clip is hilarious, but yeah, we're all taking an L on that one.
Yeah, for sure.
We
But
had zero faith.
Happy to take the L on that. DeAndre Kerr, Jonathan Osorio, and of course Lorenzo Insigne scoring the goals. Before we get into sort of just some of the questions and some of the things to pull out of that game, just Jeff, I was standing beside you for parts of the game on Saturday. How did you experience sort of that, and what was sort of your reaction? So, we're up, we're winning this game. Oh my God, what was your reaction?
Well, I got to see it off your face because the empty capo stand was calling to you, buddy. Like halfway through our conversation, you had like the 1,000-yard stare, and I was like, he's going up on that capo booth, and then immediately you were there, and so I was watching the game through your eyes because of positioning. I was right down there in the first row of 116. It was great. It was a lot of fun. We've had some time to contextualize it. And, I said the same thing to JMO last week's show. I said, do you think we're maybe going to see a sort of a new coach bump adjacent just by sheer consequence that Herdman's coming in? He's bringing a whole bunch of his staff with him. They include a lot of ancillary guys that are going to be handling medical and sports science and that sort of thing. It's an entirely new look TFC front office. Well, not entirely, but as close to entirely as I think we're going to get at this juncture. I think I was proven right. I mean, certainly Herdman meme mugging through the south end at the beginning. I can't remember if it was the first half or the second half. He put everybody on notice. But I want to hear what John says after I make my second point. And my second point is, surprise, surprise, scoring first does wonderful things for game states, and you don't have to chase a game. And I think that is a singular fact as to why we experience success, because we scored first. I mean, as a gunner, for the last 2 years, the team strategy under Arteta has been absolutely kick ass for those first 15 minutes and try to get out ahead. Pace and fitness be damned, because of what it does, how it affects game states. And we saw TFC get out at the front foot, get that very, very important first goal, and then use it in order to sort of sustain themselves. So, I don't think that can be understated. But curious as to JMO, because you said two great things in various columns over the course of this week. And the first is you're not, I think you're about 50-50 in the Herdman knock-on effect, and actually the last 10 weeks of tutelage under Dunfield finally paying off. So I'm curious now, with some distance on that game, where your sort of perspective lies on whose responsibility it was.
Yeah, I think it's more on. I give more of the credit to Terry and the work that he's done over the last 10 weeks. I think it just sort of all came together. And I think scoring first, I mean, I can't sort of overstate how important that was. I mean, incredibly to think about this, but it was the first time in 9 games that they had taken a lead in any game, like any game since the 2-1 loss away to New England on May 27th, whatever it was, which was Bob's last game. That's the last time they had a lead. And so you're quite right, Jeff. I mean, when you play from a position of strength, I think that just sets them up for greater success. And what really impressed me about it too is even when they sort of concede late in the first half and kind of against the run of play, and I would suggest a bit of a preventable goal. It was kind of soft. If this was 4 or 5 weeks ago, they would have dropped their heads and they would have essentially given up. But I like the fact that they sort of rebounded and they didn't let it get themselves discouraged, and they came out and continued to force the issue in the second half. And I just think I think having John there and having a new coach and everyone is kind of eager to impress the new coach. Sure, there's no doubt that I'm sure that was a bit of a bump, but I think it's more of a testament to the hard work that Terry's put in on the training pitch over the last 10 weeks, and it just finally clicking against a very good Philadelphia side. Let's not forget. So I think more of the credit just deserving goes to Terry Dunfield. To say nothing of the fact you got great performance out of players like DeAndre Kerr, who I think that was his best performance in the TFC jersey to date, and Alonso Coelho, who I thought, when he combined with Franco Ibarra in the center of midfield, was absolutely brilliant as a defensive shield. And even Michael Bradley playing as a center back, not his natural position. I really have to hand it to him. So I think it was just one of those nights where it all came together, and I think a lot of the credit has to go to Terry Dunfield.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about DeAndre because, in this ever-lasting search for a number 9 that TFC have been going through this entire season, we've tried so many different options at that position, including DeAndre in other games as well, with limited impact, let's just say. That said, DeAndre seems to be the one player that finds a way to sometimes make something out of nothing and find themselves in great positions to score goals. Do you think this bodes well for him in terms of maybe carrying that number 9 position? I know he doesn't wear the shirt specifically, but for the rest of the season, maybe he is the guy that you continue to start with, and then you kind of experiment with guys afterwards to see who's going to fit going into 2024.
It's an interesting question, Michael. I think to a certain degree, yes, just because when you look at the alternatives, I mean, I've been pretty unimpressed with CJ Sapong. He does a lot of good things off the ball, and, he can hold up play pretty well. But, I mean, he has 1 goal, and I can't even remember how many appearances it is, but he hasn't looked particularly dangerous. Whereas DeAndre, as you said, he can get into dangerous positions. He can make things happen. So I think you have to give the nod to him. But at the same time, you have someone like Prince Owusu, who you just signed, and you have to give him some sort of minutes as well. So, I expect DeAndre to get some minutes and some playing time, but I don't know that he has definitively established himself as the number 9 for the rest of the season. I don't think any of the strikers on this team, have that luxury or in that position. I think it's just a matter of Terry, and then later John is just going to have to give a run out to all these guys and see what he has, because he's got to evaluate for next season.
Absolutely. And you talked a little bit about it in the mailbag and TFC Republic. Just one of the questions came in about the DPs. And look, I don't think we could go through a review of this game and not talk about the DPs. We've had a lot of conversations about how they have not lived up to the price tag. They haven't lived up to sort of the bill-topping nature of their names. But in this game, they did. They really did in a lot of ways. Obviously, Lorenzo scores the goal, but I think Federico Bernardeschi looked as live as he has looked in months, to be honest. And it's one game, so we're not drawing any kind of massive conclusions from it. But at the same time, like I think Flowers do have to go to the DPS in this game because they definitely stepped up when they needed to, and really, in a lot of ways, carried the team to this result.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think as you said, I think we've all kind of been harping on their lack of production, and quite rightly. I mean, between them, they only have 9 goals. I mean, Lorenzo Insigne has the same amount of goals as DeAndre Kerr, 4. You don't pay someone whatever it is, $14 million to score 4 goals in MLS. They've been disengaged. They haven't been sort of living up to their reputations. They've been, during Bob's time anyway, they were actively undermining his authority. I think a lot of the reasons why the culture is so bad is because of their sort of lack of sort of professionalism, if you want to call it, whatever
Mhm.
it is. So, they have rightly taken, some of the blame for the current state of affairs. But you're quite right. They were absolutely brilliant on last week against Philadelphia. I thought Insigne um, had great body language the entire time. You could see Federico Bernardeschi was probably the most involved he's been in months.
Mhm.
Um, and they were just, you could see that they were, even Terry commented afterwards talking about, in moments you could see like bits of glimmers of Insigne showing leadership, like a team captain on the pitch. And I can recall, because it happened on my side of the field of the press box during one stoppage in play, Bernadeschi was pulling aside Kobe Franklin, putting his arm around his shoulder and like kind of telling him about, like obviously couldn't hear the conversation, but you could, the way
Mhm.
they're talking and the way they're motioning their hands. He was telling about, this is how you want to play the ball, and not in a derisive tone, but like kind of like a teacher kind of student moment. And that's what you want to see. So I think the fact that they're more engaged, not just in their run of play, but also in stoppages and trying to get the most out of their teammates, I think that's an encouraging sign, and it's long overdue.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm gonna sort of go all over the place because I've been liking comments all over. First from me, how much fun was that Terry Dunfield press conference? I mean, after all of those weeks of just eating shit, like, forgive my language, to see him that excited, like he was just like an excited puppy out there. And then that back and forth that you guys were having was just chef's kiss. I'm sure you've seen all the fan edits, but it felt so good. I think a lot of my joy on the night was measured against just how nice it was to see Terry flash a smile
Yeah.
finally, because the man has just been followed by a rain cloud forever and ever and ever. You were in the room. How was it palpable? Like, just
Oh yeah.
everybody. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Cool.
mean, it was like he had won the World Cup. I mean, he was just so happy. I
Hmm.
mean, first of all, he walks into the room, and before he even sits down to take a question, he thrusts his arms up like this.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, finally. Before
Yeah.
he looks at me, he's like, John, you got any good questions for me this week? And then he
Mhm.
sits, and he did it in a very joking manner, and then he sits down, and like, it was just written all over his face, right? And not just the
Mhm.
sense of relief, but the sense of like absolute joy and pride that it finally, he finally got that win. And, he could have been well within his right to sort of, make it all about him, but he didn't. It was all about, oh, I didn't do anything. It was all the players, and we just put them in a position to succeed. And it was, I've had a relationship with Terry for quite a while now, just as a reporter. Right, I've known him since
Mhm.
his playing days, and a nicer guy you won't sort of meet in Canadian soccer. And it's a real credit
Yeah.
to not just TFC, but I think Canadian soccer in general that has people like Terry Dunfield. And if, I'm glad to hear that he's going to be part of John Herdman's staff, because I
Yeah.
think he's a really smart football guy. And I would hate for this sort of, 1-8 record to taint any future prospects for him, because I do think he has got a bright future as a manager. But yeah, it was great in that room. I mean, like I said, the sheer joy that he came in before even taking a question was absolutely priceless. And as I said, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
I find it hard to. How could you not root for him, right? Like, you
Yeah.
want him to do well. One, because he's a former player at this club, but also, I mean, I think a lot of us have had some kind of interaction with him, whether it be just on the pitch or you've met him out and about. You know that he really does care a lot about this club and wants his club to do well. And yeah, look, it kind of hurt to see him every week
Oh,
just getting
It
absolutely
hurt.
battered, absolutely battered. So like it's nice to see
Mhm.
obviously a smile on his face. You talked about, those sort of these 10 ish weeks that he's been putting in with this team and finally getting that result. It's he didn't really change anything in terms of tactically, right? It's still sort of the same 4-3-3 kind of formation, generally speaking. So, like, is it just like as you said? Is it just simply things just clicked in this game? Was it something that he might have tweaked? Was it personnel? Like, because this performance is so in contrast to Columbus.
I'm going to bring up
Go
friend
ahead.
of all of our sites, Turts,
Yeah.
because it feeds into your question. We have, I mean, I use we has all the time, so it's all good, Turts. We has very clear attacking patterns of play, which I hadn't seen to this point to the season. I agree with both of those statements. So how do we contextualize this win? Because we are getting to the point where we're going to start talking about, is this repeatable? Is it sustainable? And what do we do to sort of ensure that that happens? So I guess the first question is, he's right. There were principles of play in that game. It looked like players had triggers in terms of defending and attacking, and they went there. And sure, there were some lucky bounces and lucky deflections. Anybody that watched the game is aware of them. But Turts is right. Why did it take so long, in our opinion, and because we're speculating, why the hell did it take so long to get here?
It's $1 million question. I mean, I honestly can't sort of give a definitive answer to that. I mean, I think, look, and I'm not going to minimize the losing streak that they've been on, because it's been absolutely dreadful. And they played some pretty bad football as well. And they absolutely deserve to be the position that they're in. But at the same time, I think it's five of the eight losses that they've suffered have been by one goal. Really, it's only the New York City FC game, the 5-0 drubbing, which was like, completely horrendous, that they totally got played on the park. Columbus was bad too, but at least they were in that until the end and before they conceded late. I think it was just about minimizing mistakes. I think, other than that opening goal, just before halftime, they pretty much played error-free football, and you've got, solid performances, balanced performances, pretty much from everyone. As I said before, I thought, Michael Bradley did really well in the center of defense, partnering Sigurd Rosted, which was good to see him come back and have a nice comeback game as well. So impressed with Alonso Coelho. I think he's a very mature player, and I think him playing in that sort of double pivot with Franco Ibarra really brought the best out of him. They formed that sort of defensive shield, which did a really good job of not only protecting the back four, but then providing the platform by which they can sort of launch forward and attack. And then you had sort of Osorio playing in a more advanced position, linking up really well with DeAndre Kerr.
So well.
Yeah. And then Kerr just seemed to be, as I said, on the same wavelength for a change with Lorenzo and Federico. So it just all came together. I think
it makes sense to share reps. Share those reps.
Yeah, share those reps.
You got to share those reps,
I thought we weren't going to talk about it too.
Yeah, we're not going to talk
argument.
About it, but...
Boomslang brings up something interesting, and I've heard this comment often. Philly had a bad game too, didn't they? As good as we were. I see that point, but I will raise you. This getting the lead early is so important, and I think we're seeing that writ large on this game. Philly they expected to walk all over us, and when we hit them first, they didn't have an answer. And sometimes it really is as simple as that. Like when you strike first, when a team expects you to roll over and play dead, you can upset the apple cart. Their game plan didn't include us being good. You know what I mean? So they had nothing really to fall back on, and we're waiting for a hydration break or halftime to reassess, and we just didn't give them the opportunity. I had some other notes, and they're starred here as well because I'm playing the star game. And before I forget it, Nathan's comment was good to see a win. MB4 did well to organize the back line. I think his career is now extended a few more seasons playing CB, and I think we're opening up a can of worms here because 2018 Michael Bradley at center back, and he had more gas in the tank in 2018. That cannot be disputed. That's undisputable. Had a big problem with balls over the top. I mean, that undid him. And a center back cannot be that vulnerable to one of two ways you're going to pass a ball into the box. It's either on the carpet or above the head. Do you agree with that statement? And why was Sigurd Rosted, who had zero confidence, why was he so good in that 2-man backline with MB4, who has such deficiencies? Like, did we unlock a kind of magic secret, or what? Or can we just say small sample size, forget it?
His Danish girlfriend just did give birth to their first child, so maybe that had something to do with it. He's a new father.
Yeah,
He's got the fresh
true
beat
enough.
bounce.
So there's that. I don't think he's a bad player. I mean, I appreciate that he's suffered through some poor form this year, but that's not unlike any other player really at TFC. And I think it hasn't helped that he's had to sort of work with a variety of different defensive partners. I think if he can get a consistent run of games with a consistent center back partner, or he's playing in a consistent back four and a back three, then he could be, a pretty good piece at this team. With regards to Michael, look, I think he's filled in pretty admirably the last two games at center back. And I think in a pinch, when you need him to fill in that position, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think this has extended his career by any sense. I don't think his long-term sort of prospects are at the center back position. He's a midfielder. That's his position.
I agree. Yeah.
You want him in the center of the park where he can sort of direct things and just kind of be that midfield general and have a real influence on games. And, he can have an influence defensively when he's playing as a center back. But I just think you gain so much more, if nothing more than steadying presence in the center of the park when he's deployed as a central midfielder.
Yeah, and I think the key to him always has been, or at least in the last couple of years, is try to minimize the amount of running he has to do in the middle of the park, right? Make sure that
Andre Pirlo
all away. Exactly.
Like deep lying playmaking midfielder. Why not?
Exactly. We just haven't been able to do that. And he's been exposed a lot because of that, because, he is 36 and he's got 36-year-old legs, even though he's still an absolute Terminator in terms of his fitness. I wanted to talk about two players specifically, and they're both our outside backs, but I'll start with Kobe Franklin, because I thought if there's a sort of breakout game a player is going to have as a young player, this might have been it for him in terms of just the way that he played, both defensively, but also the balls he was playing. And you talked a little bit, and maybe this gives a little bit of insight into those balls, but obviously having that arm around with Federico Bernardeschi talking about how to play those balls, it looked like he's taken a few steps up this season, obviously in the minutes that he's played, but it looks like he took another leap in terms of his ability to play on this first team and maybe cement himself as a first choice right back for this team. Maybe John, just in terms of your observations of the game, maybe talk a little bit about Kobe and sort of what sort of impressed you about his performance on Saturday.
I thought it was his best game for TFC by far. I mean, he's always been, I think, very good at getting forward, but it's kind of like that final ball, that final pass has kind of been lacking quality. And I think, one of the things that Bob has kind of impressed upon him, I mean, last year in preseason was about him wanting to become more defensively sound. I think this year was more about adding that sort of attacking element to the game in terms of the final product. And I think we saw that against Philadelphia. I mean, that ball that he played for Bernardeschi, that was unbelievable.
You should have heard the gasps in this, in this section. Like, there were gasps when he made that pass.
Yeah. And that was after the sort of the arm around the shoulder moment. And then too, I mean, I don't want to minimize it, but the cross that he played for Osorio on the header was pretty picturesque as well. So it was great to see him adding those sort of attacking elements. He's always been an attack-minded player, but adding those sort of final balls that really lead to something. And I think that was kind of the thing that he needs to do to get to that next level in terms of sort of establishing himself as the regular starting right fullback. But I thought it was outstanding. It was great to see, especially for a kid like that who, when he didn't make the jump last season from TFC2 to TFC, the senior team, I mean, there was a little bit of disappointment on his sort of regard that he had to spend another, season MLS Next Pro, but, didn't let that deter him. And I think he's quite positively, proven himself that he can play at this level this year.
Yeah, and it's funny when you talk about a year full of disappointment, right? A year that just hasn't turned out the way you thought it would. It was probably a player that no one really thought would be that kind of an impact player on the team. Probably having the best season for TFC, realistically. Like, I think he's probably one, if not, you can maybe give an award to DeAndre Kerr to a certain extent, in terms of just having that season that is like, okay, here's a positive. This is a real positive that's come out of A season where a lot of players, especially a lot of the senior players, have not really performed up to the level that I think everybody would have expected them to.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the season that Jaden Nelson had last year, or Luca Petrasso too. I mean, I don't think anyone really saw them.
No.
They would have like the strong seasons that they did last year. And I mean, I thought Kobe would be a nice complementary piece this year. I certainly didn't expect him to sort of perform at the level that he has. So it's a nice story, and it's good to see for such a young player who, came up through the academy and then, graduated to TFC2 and now is with the senior team. He's kind of followed the path that, they aspire, that they want for all their kids that they're developing. So it's a great sign to see.
Absolutely. And before we just jump back into the comments here, because I know, Jeff, you've got a few starred there.
No, move to the left. I want to talk about Petretta's best game in a TFC shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's it, right? It was his best game, I think, in a Toronto
easily
shirt. I felt like for the first time he actually felt fully connected to the team. It felt like, there were games where he played well or played decently and the team was a little behind, or, vice versa. But I felt like this, again, was a game where, you could say everybody from to 1 to 11 essentially was connected. But this was a game where I felt like you really felt his impact as a left back connecting with Lorenzo Insigne.
On both sides of the ball. I mean, going forward, absolutely brilliant. But I mean, I think I can't remember if it was the first 5 minutes or maybe it was the first 2 minutes. He makes that sort of recovery run in that last ditch tackle, right in the 6-yard box to prevent a goal. If Philly scores that goal and goes up 1-0 inside the first 5 minutes, we might be having an entirely different.
Well, he's going to be back.
A lot more frowns. Yep. Here we go again.
So I was really impressed with him. You're quite right, Michael. I thought it was his best game for TFC on such a solid two-way display, both from an attacking perspective, linking up with Lorenzo quite effectively on that left-hand side in attack, but also defensively. I think he was just so sound. So again, a really standout performance from the Italian.
Absolutely. Well, Mike hacks out a lung. Let's go to another one of the comments. No, nothing really there. So I'm gonna go to some of my chicken scratch notes. Perusa scored today. Was it today or yesterday? I can't even remember.
For Wanderers, that would have been today. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's today. Nice little goal too. The kind of sort of distant shot, that we saw him do. He score so much for TFC 2. Once again, the questions are being asked. Do you think this guy can do it on the first team in MLS?
I like Jordan. He's a good kid, Juventus fan, so he's a guy with after my own heart. At this point, I think it might be best for him to sort of move out of Toronto, to go elsewhere, to get out of the Toronto bubble, whether that's in MLS, whether that's in the CPL, USL, whatever. I mean, I do think I don't know. I think he's gone as far as he can with TFC. And I just think that, the team with the situation that they're in, they're in desperate need of proven goal scorers. I don't think I'd like to lead the line. I think they're going to go after guys who have a track record of scoring. And, with all due respect to Jordan, he hasn't shown that during his time at TFC. So I think it might be time. It's probably the best thing for him, like, to move on and get out of Toronto and where he can start really moving on with his career.
Yeah, I think this.
Yeah, he would be so far. Sorry. Yeah, because he'd be so far down that depth chart. It's crazy. It's crazy. And Temi, what do we think about Temi? I can't pronounce his last name. I've tried a zillion times. Yeah.
Antonoglu. Yeah,
Antonoglu. There we go.
Yeah, I was, I watched a fair bit of TFC2 last year, and not so much this year, but I was really impressed with him. I thought he was a really solid player who can play a variety of different positions. Bit disappointed that he didn't get more playing time this year. I would have thought he would have had more opportunities, and he's basically, the start against, what was it, Columbus? I think was his first or second of the season. He spent a lot of time with TFC2, again playing on the weekend. Maybe it's just a matter of needing more time, just because he's still a pretty young player, and he just needs more reps to sort of get up to speed. But I do think there's something there that potentially he can be a regular contributor. Maybe not a first team regular starter, but someone who you bring off the bench who's maybe first or second choice. When you need to add some fresh legs. I think he just needs a little bit more time in terms of gaining experience and needs more reps to really kind of become a seasoned pro.
Absolutely.
Where do you see him? Where do you see him operating out of? Because G Money raises a point. The worry I have for the kids like Temi that are locked into one position is they'll be hard pressed to get playing time if we bring bigger quality in. I mean, that's not a TFC specific problem. That's a soccer global problem. But do you see Temi as having an assigned position? I see him as a bit more of a utility player at this level. Now, does that speak to a certain measure of incompetence at the front office for not finding out where he plays and forcing him to be a utility player? Or do you think that that's sort of 50-50, 6 one way, half dozen the other?
I think it's more a 6 of 1, halfway to that. I mean, I think his versatility is something that benefits him. I think that's not a knock on him. I think the fact that he can play, a number of different positions in the modern game, you need that, right? I mean, we're seeing Michael Bradley play as a center back. I think pigeonholing a guy into he's a left back, he's a right back, he's a wing back, he's a left-sided central midfielder. In this day and age, I think the more versatility you can bring, the better. So I don't think him being able to play, a variety of positions, and him looking at him saying, we think he's a central midfielder. I don't think that necessarily works against him. I think that works in his favor.
Interesting. And to just go back in terms of just Peruzza really quickly, like I agree with you, John. I really do think that this loan is the best thing for him. Right. I think him getting out of town, getting out of his comfort zone, playing on a team that is fighting for something. The Wanderers, not to make this a CPL chat really quickly, but are fighting for a playoff spot in the Canadian Premier League. So every game right now matters for them. They lost today against York, but he did score. I think it's good for him. And then he can kind of figure out that maybe there's life beyond Toronto FC, right, in terms of his career. Because as talented as I think he is, and I think he's very talented, and he could be a leading striker for any team, I really think he needs to think about doing that somewhere else and getting real minutes to play. And whether that's in the Canadian Premier League or it's USL where he's had success before, or another MLS club that's willing to sort of take a shot at him and say, like, hey, you're our guy, and you sort of run things. I do think there are times where a lot of the young Toronto FC players do have to eventually say, like, you got to fly the coop, right? And
it's not enough.
Successful ones generally have, right? They've left the coop and either they come back to the club or they find success elsewhere and end up on the national team. So, for players like Peruzza, I don't think Temi's there yet, but, who knows? There is life outside of the club. I get it. It's very easy to stay here. It's very comfortable. Everybody. You're close to home and close to your family. And TFC treat their young players really well in terms of being paid, in terms of taking care of them at the facilities, things like that. It's hard to find that.
Everything except giving them playing time, like proper reps. Well, if I'm Jordan Peruzza, I'm having an existential crisis because the one thing that this team has been screaming for all year is a number 9. Hey, I'm a number 9. I'm on the books and I'm getting garbage minutes here, garbage minutes there. It's understood that strikers are the most streaky, the most susceptible to mood and phase of the moon, and also the most susceptible to regular reps. So while we're sitting here going, we don't have a striker and he's not getting regular minutes, that to me would be the cause of many, many sleepless nights. So I'm very, very happy that he's sort of out of that cauldron of existential hurt.
But I would, and I'd love to get your thought on this in response to that, Jeff. Is how we are as fans, right? Like, we want the biggest and the best at this club, right? We want to sign Messi. We didn't sign Messi. Okay, let's go get Ibrahimovic. Let's go get Lukaku. Let's go get the biggest names that we possibly can. Like, that's how our fan base right now works. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, right? Like, who wouldn't want to go sign these guys? When Lorenzo Insigne, when those rumors started up, everybody's like, who wouldn't make that signing 9 times out of 10 if he becomes a free and he's willing to come, right? Jim, I wonder, though, in terms of the way that fans think about these kind of things, is it for us to maybe adjust those expectations a little bit and to say, like, hey, we have a young player coming through our academy who has a lot of talent. We should be patient with that player and give them time to develop. And I'm not talking like a stretch of like 5 games and then it's done. Like, it may have to be a season for them to really grasp it, or maybe even 2. Do fans should fans adjust those expectations, or is it just, hey, look, go get the best players we can because it's TFC and we've got the money to do so?
Yeah, I mean, I'm uncomfortable telling fans what to think, to be perfectly honest,
No, fair
Mike.
Yeah,
enough.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I mean, I don't think it's terribly reasonable to say to fans that, especially with the state of the club that they're in, because we're talking about a third year where they haven't made the playoffs, to say to them, look, we're going to bring Jordan back, or we're going to bring Iowa Canola back, and we're going to let them run with it next year. Like, they're going to be our two guys up front, and just, no matter how it goes, we're going to stick with it because,
That's
we're
fair.
we're invested in them. I mean, how well would that go over? I mean,
Led
you guys
Zeppelin.
are close. You guys
Yeah.
are closer to the supporters than I am, but I suspect that wouldn't go over all that
It would
well,
not.
right?
Uh-uh.
So, and look, it's nice to think that you can sort of bring up guys who have come up through your system, through the academy to TFC2, to go into the first team, and they're going to be like lead the charge and lead the way. And sometimes that does happen. I mean, the team has produced some pretty substantial players who have come up through the ranks and gone on to first team success, but it doesn't happen all the time. And again, with going back to Jordan, and not to beat a dead horse, I just think he needs to get out of the Toronto bubble. I mean, he's someone who was born here, spent most of his time here, aside from going to Italy briefly in his youth team career. It could be that the best thing for him is just to get out of here and just start fresh. And I've watched a couple of HFX games this year. I've been impressed with him. I know today was only his first goal, but he's played really well. I mean, the game against, I believe, was Forge, where I thought he was outstanding. I mean, he won the penalty. He was just a really solid contributor. So, maybe that's where he has to be, is being like the lead guy on a strong CPL team, just in terms of reinvigorating his career.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, I could talk for years about how I think it's naive to expect any professional team to promote from the academy unilaterally. That just doesn't happen in global football. It's not going to happen in MLS. But I also think TFC has a huge hole between the second team and the first team, and they've got to, hopefully this is something Herdman addresses in his tenure, but there has to be a better path than just garbage minutes. There has to be a bit more trust in the youth to make their mistakes. I mean, obviously when you're staring down a wooden spoon and you're on your third coach and in as many years, all of that goes out the window. But I'd like to think that when we do reach, because we didn't see it off the back of 2017, we didn't have enough time, really. Like, we started buying the Vanderveels and getting rid of the Beta Shores and getting too big for our britches. But I think that's the next real evolution of this club is not necessarily guaranteeing all academy kids a space on the first team, but giving them a better chance to spread their wings and shine in that environment. Because I think that decisions are made too willy-nilly. I have the comment came up from Casey, and I always will argue this because I think it's myopic to say, well, everyone does better when they leave Shaft, Lucas, Koff. We weren't playing the Gary Smith system. They were superfluous, to say nothing about who was occupying their spot on the first team. So the fact that they got better ignores the fact that maybe somebody who is as direct as Jacob Schaffelberg thrives in a system that is all about the counterattack, as opposed to TFC, which was trying to be this sort of like hybrid possession based team, where someone with the name Lorenzo Insigne was kind of blocking his minutes. So I always take issue with that, but at the end of the day, I don't take issue with the idea that I don't think TFC has been too fair to their academy. I don't think they've used them necessarily in the best way. And I think that's something moving forward that the team needs to address, because certainly when you look at what we're producing and what we're getting out of it, the ends don't justify the means. And the whole point of having this academy was to for the ends to justify the means. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair criticism. I think they could certainly do a little bit better in terms of blooding the youngsters into the first team and giving them more opportunities, and maybe not cutting bait with them so quickly. I mean, I think for me, Ralph Prizo was one of the most promising prospects that they had, and I get that you wanted to bring in Mark Anthony Kaye, but my God, to sort of trade away that piece in such a block and give up so much to get Mark Anthony Kaye, and then he barely lasts a year. I think that's a trade that in retrospect, the club regrets, making. But then you got guys like Jaden Nelson, who, does quite well last year, has a really good sort of season, and he gets sold off to Norway and the team in Norway, and the team turns a profit. So, I mean,
yeah.
And by all accounts, Jaden wanted to move abroad. So, I mean, I think that even though, it was really only his one season last year, he was a regular starter, and then he ended up going elsewhere. I still think that has to be considered success, and good on TFC for giving him that chance and then selling him on. But I think you're right, Jeff. I mean, I do think the club has to do a little bit better of a job of that in terms of incorporating the young kids in the lineup and just give them more of a chance.
Absolutely. I mean, Turtz is saying Priso hasn't done anything since his injury, and I think that's a point. But sure. I also think Priso became a trade block because you had the unfortunate circumstance of being on the same team as Ayo Akinola, and both of them were having trouble getting over their injuries. They had made a much more significant investment in Ayo, and they sort of hedged their bets on Ayo, and we all know how that worked out. But I do think that under, if you put a gun to my head and ask me one of the reasons that Ralph was moved, one, there weren't a lot of trade chips. I mean, no one was trading for Ayo, right? But and I think the other one is that he just had the misfortune of being on the same squad at the same time as Ayo Akinola, both getting over injuries at the same time. Yeah.
And I think that's what happened with Schaffelberg. I mean, I know a lot of people were pissed off about when that trade was made, but, at the time he was playing behind Lorenzo Insigne. So, with all due respect to Jacob, and I know Lorenzo was kind of, had his issues this year. I mean, if it comes down to Lorenzo Insigne or Jacob Schaffelberg, especially after they paid him, that boatload of money, I can certainly understand why,
exactly.
So, in some cases, you're just going to fall prey. A young player is going to lose out like that because there's a more experienced, established player ahead of him in the pecking order. And for Jacob's case, I don't think there's any question that the move has worked out the best for him in terms of his own personal.
Amazing.
Role. So, everyone wins, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let's move into a little bit of a mailbag with JMO. We have some questions.
You left in. Before you do that, you skipped the I was really looking forward to this one.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Ask.
Yeah. Is this the worst time possible for a 2-week break for TFC? Because I already answer yes. I mean, we just caught some form, and now we got another 2-week break. And if you remember the 3 weeks that we were supposed to rest and recharge post Leagues Cup and how flat we came out afterwards, it seems that this, we personally at the beginning of the season, I was worried about fixture congestion with the Leagues Cup and the breaks and all the international shenanigans and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reality has been there's been several times in this season where we seem to stop dead for an extended period of time. I don't think it's ever a good idea to stop your campaign for 2 weeks in the middle of your campaign. And we keep doing it. And this is off the back of a pretty encouraging victory. I mean, is there any other answer than this is a terrible time to take another 2 weeks off? Or would you throw some water on my fire of discontent?
I take your point. I would throw a little bit of water on the fire in that it does give them a chance to get a little bit healthy. I mean, Shane O'Neill is going through the concussion protocol, and that can sometimes take more than 1 or 2 weeks. So it gives him a little bit more time to kind of go through that process and be healthy, because if he doesn't, then, Michael Bradley will probably have to continue to play at center back, or, God help TFC if they have to slot in Ame Mabika back in there, because he's been absolutely dreadful the last couple months. I'm trying to think who else is. Latif Blessing, dealing with a lower body injury, and he played for TFC 2 last Friday. So it gives him, it gives O'Neill, it gives. I mean, who knows if Christian Gutierrez is ever going to get healthy again?
Yeah.
It gives those guys a little bit more time to sort of get match fit and whatnot, and so. Not the worst thing in the world, but I take your point. I mean, when you're winning, you want to play and you kind of get some momentum finally.
Yeah.
And you have to shut it down for 2 weeks. Yeah, that's not ideal. But, they're really not in a position to do anything about it, right? It's just the way things.
True enough.
Hey,
True
Jeff,
enough.
remember last week we were complaining about lower leg injury FC. So another 2 weeks
Right.
so that these guys
Yeah.
the guys can get healthy. Okay, a couple of questions here in the mailbag for you, JMO.
Sure.
And if you do have a question for JMO, feel free to type it into the chat if you're watching.
Yeah, now's
on
the
YouTube.
time.
Yeah, now's the time to type those questions in. I think a few came.
Did I star
through
some of
just
them?
before
Yeah.
we started? So if Jeff, you can go back and star some of those,
Mhm.
that'd be awesome.
That's what I'm doing.
But the first question I'm going to ask here is actually from you, Jeff. Just in, do you expect Toronto FC under John Herdman to sign more Canadian national team players to the roster? Big offseason coming up. I know we've talked about that already. But now with John Herdman at the helm of the club, do you think there's going to be more of an emphasis on trying to get some national team players into the fold at TFC?
You're asking me or you're asking Jeff?
Oh, please.
I'm
go
asking
ahead.
you.
Either-
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
you,
sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's something that even before John has come here. I mean, it's something that Bill Manning has talked about in terms of wanting to get more Canadian national team members on the team, especially with 2026 coming. Right? I mean, I think just from a commercial perspective, to hear guys say if Lucas Cavallini somehow comes back to MLS and he plays with TFC, and then to hear him referred to as a TFC player during the 2026 World Cup, you can't buy that kind of advertising. Now it has to make sporting sense as well, obviously, but I think it's something that, just knowing from having the conversations I've had with Bill, it's probably something that they want to do. And I think Herdman, he knows a lot of these players, right? He's coached them. I think in the most part he has their sort of respect and their admiration. So I don't see why he wouldn't want to bring them aboard. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Would you feel the same way if he was sort of giving contracts to the Junior Hoylets of the world? I mean, Junior's my man, but without a club right now, obviously, well over the age of 30. Right. The same could be said of the Steven Vittorias of the world, or some of the other people that are in John's orbit that he may feel a need to sort of give a thank you contract to. Now, I'm not gonna what skincare routine? Casey. What was I gonna say? Sorry, Casey just completely knocked me off my socks there. Would you feel the same way if we're bringing in players like the Junior Hoylets or the Steven Vittorias? Do you think that fulfills a need, or that creates a gulf?
No, I think that creates a gulf. As I said, I mean, I'm all for bringing Canadians into the TFC if that's what they want to do. But as I said, it has to be for sporting reasons, right? I mean, just sort of rewarding guys for their past services, that's not enough good reason. And for Junior, yeah, I mean, he's 32, 33. Does he really sort of address a positional need for TFC? I don't think so. I mean, so it doesn't make sense. I think you have to it's got to make sense, obviously, in terms of on the field from a sporting perspective, and also the commercial aspects are secondary in my opinion. But Junior, and I don't want to pick on Junior. I think he's a quality player. I just don't think I don't think he really helps TFC in terms of their greatest sort of area of need right now, is what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of players taking up positions that he would traditionally play already. So unless you're going to be moving some DPs, don't know where he exactly plays, and I don't think he's coming here to be a bench player.
That's right, exactly.
From that perspective. G Money.
I got more. Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to ask this one here from G Money here,
sure.
Just in the chat. He's just asking about Cozy Thompson. Obviously, if you're not aware, transferred to Lillestrøm last week. I think it's a loan with a purchase to buy, or option to buy, excuse me. Do we have any word on what that amount would be for the purchase? Has that been? I didn't see anything.
I haven't seen anything. I mean, I assume it would be low six figures. I mean, that's just an educated guess. I hope it works out for him. And if when I heard the news, I just thought, well, that's kind of random. The team from Norway would be interested in Kosi, and that's no sort of offense to Kosi. I just thought that's kind of coming out of nowhere, just considering
it's coming out of Norway.
Yeah, it's coming out of nowhere considering the season he's had. He hasn't been, I thought last season he looked pretty decent. This year it's been, but fair play to him. I mean, he's getting this loan. It's a great opportunity, and if he can get regular playing time and impress and move on to to a top European league, it's not Serie A or the Bundesliga, but it's still pretty good. Then fair play to him. I hope it works out for him.
Perfect.
Okay. Why do you think? Oh, I like this new adventure we're having here. Why do you think Herdman is joining the team with 3 games left? That comes from Alex C.
Yeah, I think a lot of the thing is it's people are sort of worried about, October 1st, and they're sort of reading all kinds of things into it, right? I think it's mostly just a consideration to Canada Soccer, right? I mean, he still had years left on his contract. If he were to leave tomorrow, then he's leaving them really in a lurch, and so I think it's a compromise, right? They're letting him out of his contract early, but he's sort of sticking around a little bit longer to help, assistant Mauro Biello, who's worked under him for several years, just sort of passing along some institutional knowledge and getting him ready for, there's Nations League in November. So I think it's just a courtesy out of John. It's really just a compromise, and, fair play to him. I mean, and fair play to Canada Soccer too. Like if they wanted, they could really play hardball with him and not release him, but they are. And so they're getting, a month, 5 weeks out of his life to stay on. It's a pretty fair compromise, I think. And so I don't think people should be too bad out of shape over it.
Yeah, and then David Perrot on Twitter asked essentially the same question of why doing that, and I think it makes sense, right? Like he's like you said, under contract, right. He is going to be involved in terms of getting Mauro Biello up to speed. I mean, in terms of getting ready for the October friendlies, or the October window, and at that point, he still has stuff to do, right? Like it's like any other job, right? And of course, being the national team manager is a little bit more than 2 weeks' notice, but I think from that perspective, there's there's really no rush for him to get to TFC anyway. I mean, yes, I get it. Like it would be great if he could come in now and sort of get time with the players and assess, but he's going to be pretty much at like every home game essentially watching them play, right? So from that perspective, and I'm sure he'll be around the training ground. He normally is from a national team perspective anyway. So from that perspective, he will be in and around the team. He's just officially not able to do things until October 1st.
And I think the other thing, Michael, is like, he's confirmed that Terry Dunfield is going to be on like his first team staff as an assistant.
Yeah, great point.
He's going to be in constant communication with Terry. I don't think he's going to be saying, well, this is how I want like the 11 start, like the starting 11, and this is how I think you should play. But, he's going to be getting regular reports from Terry in terms of, getting his feedback on things. So he's going to be connected to someone who's going to be a part of his staff going forward. So I think that's an important sort of part to remember about this as well.
Yep. I have a question before we get to Richards, which is a belter. He just wrote out a corker of a question. I realized that we euphemistically said no last week. Do we think TFC's got another couple wins in them?
A couple wins?
I'd like to see more than one, John.
Yeah, I'd like to see more than one as well.
We're talking about more than one. Well, look, they got to play Inter Miami, which one of them on the road, and I don't see them getting anything out of that game, considering
that might suck. Yeah.
Is it possible? Sure. Anything is possible, but I don't think I'm being terribly unfair in saying that we haven't seen anything close to resembling consistency from this team over the last couple of months. Consistently inconsistent, but not consistently good or anything like that. So, the Philadelphia performance was encouraging, and I think that's should give people a lot of hope that they are capable of playing like a unified team. But, can they do that consistently, especially now that they're on this break, and do it repeatedly over and over again with so much that's gone on behind the scenes? I don't know. I mean, I would bet against it. If they can, let me put it this way: if they can get 2 more wins out of their final, or is it 7 games, 8 games?
Yeah, about that.
I think it's 7 or 8 games. Yeah.
Okay. If they can get 2 wins, then I think you take that and run. I mean, you take the money and run.
Yeah.
Anything more than
100%.
that, I would be absolutely stunned. Like if they somehow get 3 or 4 wins, that would blow me away.
If they get 3 or 4 wins, okay. No, you know what? Never mind. I'm not going there. I'm
No,
not
there
going
was.
there.
Well,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
not going
There's.
there. I was
Yeah.
gonna go
I
there,
mean, we
and then I
won't.
realized it was
Yeah.
ridiculous. Don't go there.
I think
Don't
if
go
we
there.
get 2 wins, we're still wooden spoon territory. But
Sure. Oh,
Columbus are
absolutely.
pretty.
Yeah.
Columbus are pretty awful. Or sorry, Colorado are pretty awful this year, unfortunately. Um. Okay. Here's the one. Richard Greenberg. I'm actually going to post this one up because it's so good. John, when did you realize that Bob Bradley wouldn't work out with TFC? And do we need to ask you this question in a year?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
God, when did I realize? Probably. I'd probably say, well, let me put it this way. I don't know that I would say that it wouldn't work out, but like when I kind of knew that it was, the end was pretty near, was after the Austin game. When Bernadeschi kind of spoke out afterwards. And like I was on that Zoom call, and like the rant that he went on against Bob without saying his name was totally sort of provoked. Like we didn't sort of say anything. We didn't say, what did you think of Bob's coaching or anything like that? He sort of went on that rant totally on his own. And for a player of his caliber and his stature to sort of sound off on like that, whether right or wrong, I think
there's
it's
trouble at the hen house.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I just kind of, and you heard rumblings before then about disunity and everything, and I'm not discounting that, but the fact that it was so blatant and open and out in the public, you just thought, God, where are they going to go from here? Like, how could Bob possibly kind of continue on? It was just untenable. And through no fault, I mean, I'll say through no fault of Bob's on his own, because I don't think anyone deserves to be sort of called out like that by one of his players. If, you have those conversations behind the scenes. But, the fact that Bernadeschi was so unapologetically, brazen about it, calling his coach out. And then, 3 days later, I talked to him one-on-one, expecting him, maybe he walks it back, right? Maybe he says, well, it was, I was frustrated or whatnot. Didn't mean it. He doubled down.
He doubles down. Yeah. I remember that.
Same thing. So it's like, I guess, after that, I just thought, I just don't see how it's possible for, Bob to retain his position. I just think it's beyond him now.
Yeah. I mean, I've been trying to recontextualize it, and I'll always remember it was an all for one before they stopped doing it. Now they started doing it again because we're winning, but it was an all for one. It was a training session, and it was a medium wide shot of Lorenzo going to sit down on a bench with Bob, and Bob was like, "Good one. It's nice, watching you interact with all the young players and stuff like that." And it just sounded like a grandfather trying to hello, fellow kids. Like it seemed so awkward and uncomfortable, and it gave me a bad taste in my mouth when I watched it in the moment. And now that I'm trying to recontextualize it, that to me was maybe the first moment where I was like, yeah, there's a gap. And it looks like it's like an immovable object meeting and whatever the euphemism is. I always screw that one up. Whatever it is, I'll find a better way to describe it. But yeah, a clash of personalities, and that to me was my first clue. And then also the fact that Bob Bradley was a pioneer in many, many ways, and that Swansea trip, no one's going to turn it down. But how quick the Euro snobs were to dismiss him out of turn, and then seeing it kind of repeated, in a nauseating way here in TFC with European players kind of reaching for that shorthand. I don't have to respect this guy. I have historical precedent. So once I saw that apple cart kind of rolling, I was like, oh man, I don't know if there's any saving this kind of thing. But I'll own up to my own resistance because Bob's pedigree spoke for itself. And as a fan of this club for so long, this was like the boss fight, getting Bob in to work with Michael was the end result of so much of that we've been working for. So I was very reluctant to let go of that dream personally.
Yeah. I mean, it was a big deal getting Bob Bradley. I mean, let's not forget who, the previous coach of the team was. I mean, you went from, sort of Chris Armas and Javier Perez, and no disrespect to them, but they're not at the same class as Bob Bradley. You were getting an MLS Coach of the Year, an MLS Cup champion, one of the most successful coaches in league history, a guy who's coached at the World Cup, who's coached in in leagues in France and England. So it was a big get, and I can understand why TFC gave him as long as they did, right? Because you don't want to sort of cut bait with a guy like that after one bad season. You want to give him enough rope to see if he can turn it around. And as I said previously, I mean, there were some things working against Bob in terms of, the Italian DPs trying to undermine him. The amount of injuries that they've dealt with the last 2 seasons is just, I mean,
astronomical.
They've got to get that straight, because that absolutely hurt them. But and I like Bob. I know to some he might come across as this grumpy old gruff guy, but I found him to be quite personable, and I quite enjoyed chatting football with him. I had a lot of time for him. But honestly, I would have liked to have seen him succeed, but there were some missteps as well. I mean, there were some really bad trades, and just some this idea about in the off season putting so much focus on strengthening the starting 11 to the extent that the bench was an afterthought, and the team's lack of depth. I mean,
we knew it. Yeah,
you don't construct a team like that. You need proper balance, and that's one of the things that has really hurt this team throughout this year, is the lack of roster balance. And bringing in guys like Adama Diomande, who hasn't worked out, or trading for Mark Anthony Kaye and it not working out. Trading away Lucas McNaughton and bringing in, CJ Sapong.
Yeah.
These are all, with all due respect to Bob, these are all, pretty questionable moves. And I don't think any of them really sort of helped the club in any substantive way. So there were things working against him, but there were a lot of missteps as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we can argue until the end of the day that his hands were tied for the Diomande move and et cetera, and But at the end of the day, the move was made, at the end of the, and here we are. Right. So, here we go. Actually, Mike, I interrupted you. So you asked.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I saw Casey's comment there. A lot of people were saying, hey, what Bob Bradley for the men's national team? Not a chance. I just, they don't have that kind of money anyway.
They don't have that kind of money. I mean, they would have to hope that his ego is so bruised that he'd be willing to work for peanuts. But he's coached through civil wars. Certainly this bruised his ego, absolutely, but I have to think he's made a sterner stuff than that, considering how long he's been coaching in a professional environment.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't think that his reputation would take that big of a hit, just in terms of what's happened with TFC, but you never know, right? I mean, it's your last stint that most people tend to remember.
Yeah, 100%.
And so I can't help but wonder how much this has hurt Bob. Now, I don't know. Maybe he gets a job offer tomorrow. Maybe he's going to, return to club football. But it wouldn't surprise me if he gets if it's a little bit harder for him to find his next job, or if he just decides, I'm 66, 67, whatever I am.
Yeah.
Time to call it quits. I've had a pretty good run at it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And no harm, no foul for that. It's the best of us that know when to pull our own curtain, right? It's the,
right.
And in this specific sport, it's a rarity, like we watched Josie Altidore convince himself he could still play for the last 3 years of his time with TFC. And that's not unheard of. There are questions I want to ask about stuff that I'll get in trouble about. So I'm just not going to ask them, and we'll let the chips fall where they may. Yeah.
But let's head over to the burning question. And
you got to prep me better for that. All right, hold on.
There we go.
Run that thing. Where is it? Oh yeah, there it is. All right, here we go.
The burning question presented by Nextdoor. It's back to school season. If you know a kid in your neighborhood that gives back to their community, nominate them on the Nextdoor app in the TFC fan group, and they could win tickets to the September 16th game versus Vancouver, which a lot of you in the chat are also saying that we should win. So, hey, bring a kid to the game, they might actually see a win.
I'm
Plus,
so mad at you. I was supposed to do that cold read. That was mine. Do you have to do all the cold reads on our
Oh, my
show
bad.
ever?
Sorry, dude.
No, don't worry about it. No.
Well,
Do your
they're
cold
getting
read.
plus if they win, they get food and swag for their entire family. So to join the group, just download the app in the App Store or get it at nextdoor.ca. Apologies, Jeff. Next week you will get the gold read.
Apologies, Turts. Next week I will. I'm going to load a new one that's like 50% of the volume. That Stinger's getting louder every week we use it. It's crazy. Yeah.
So the question we asked you this week was, what impressed you about Toronto FC's 3-1 win on against Philadelphia? So in the next door group, Chris D just saying scoring some goals, which I don't blame him. I mean, prior to the Montreal game, there had been a desert of them. Honestly, the team seemed more confident in having some of our bigger names actually helping and playing well. Was really good. I also asked him a question about new manager bounce. Was that a factor? He says maybe, but John, you kind of spoke a little bit more to Terry's preparation with the team over the last 10 weeks. I think that really does sort of answer that. And then Heather just says they played like they should have played all season. It was nice to see them play with more confidence and not like they were defeated. Again, John, something that you had mentioned before, and you had mentioned in other pieces before. Yep. And before we get into sort of the Twitter comments, just again, how much do you think this might help that confidence factor? Because you had talked about this team essentially playing with little, I don't say pride. I'm always hesitant to say the word pride when it comes to players, because players always have pride and go out and have their own professional pride. But just that confidence,
that's the rumor
of we're Toronto FC, right? How much do you think that might help them?
I would think a fair bit. I mean, they've, again, not to put too much of a fine point on it, but they've been pretty dreadful the last 3 months.
Yeah.
The fact that they were able to put in this quality performance and a fully deserving victory over a very good Philadelphia side. And what was most encouraging about it wasn't just the Italian DPs, although they played brilliantly. It was everyone. It was a balanced effort. I mean, I can't think of, anyone in the starting 11 who really had a bad game. Maybe you can think Thomas Romero probably could have done better. But we've talked about everyone so far, whether it was the fullbacks or the central defenders or the midfield or the attack. Everyone pulled their weight. Everyone contributed. And so that's the most encouraging thing. And I would think that they would take a great deal of sort of encouragement from that, and that they are capable of producing, that type of performance against, one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. So now the point is, repeatability and sustainability. Can they do it over and over again? And can they sort of, maintain these high level of standards? And I don't think it's a mistake, I don't think it's an accident that this performance came, shortly after Michael Bradley's return. I think standards have been allowed to drop like abysmally low during his absence. And I think the fact that he's back there and, holding not only himself, but others accountable, I don't think it's a mistake that you saw one of the best performances from the team against Philadelphia.
So well put.
So, I would think that that's going to be a benefit of them too going forward.
Absolutely. And look, as much as fans, as people who have watched this show quite a bit, it's easy to get on Michael Bradley for things, right? Not enough pace. Seems like he's behind it a little bit. He's 36. Should he be thinking about the next step in his career? You cannot underestimate the type of leadership he can bring to a room, even if you don't always agree with him all the time, right? Even if he sometimes can be that intense, right? Right. And that intensity can rub people the wrong way a lot of the time. Right. And I think that, but you can't underestimate it, because it does make people kind of look around and be like, well, if this guy's like, I got it. Right. Like it's one of those things. And I don't think that can be underestimated. I think you're right. I think that was sorely missed around the first team. G Money just on Twitter just commented, what didn't impress about Toronto FC's fans that game? The number 9 scored and made an assist. Midfield 3 looked really good together. Kobe dropping dimes. Raul, best game in the TFC uniform. Michael Bradley steady at center back. Best team effort maybe since before the pandemic. But, there were 45 minutes against Charlotte where everything looked like
Yeah,
television had been
no.
televised.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
There
true.
was
Yeah.
45 minutes
And
where
it-
everything looked perfect.
Yeah, I think back to that Charlotte game, and we were like, I can remember, looking around at my colleagues in the press box, and we're like, "Holy cow, is this what we can expect every week? This is awesome."
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
great. About.
Joke's on
And
you,
of
Joe.
course, took a nosedive after that. But yeah, I look back at that 45 minutes, and that was just like that was stunning.
Yeah.
I mean,
That was
some of the
lights
best-
out.
that was
Absolute
some of
lights
the
out.
best sort of football they played, albeit against an expansion franchise. But
Mhm.
Hey, you got to
But-
beat who's
Yeah.
put in front of you.
yeah,
You know?
no doubt.
Turks
doubt.
just said overall commitment to the cause was something we haven't seen since early on in the season. And just an opposite side of the viewpoint, because a lot of them were obviously positive, good vibes. It was a win. Jordan just chimed in and says, I don't care. The team has an identity crisis. Let's see if Herdman is our coach this time next year. Or if they'll pull the plug on him like they did Bob Bradley. And look, I think there is something to that. And again, this is a good vibe show, so I don't want to spend too long on negative vibes. But there are a lot of people that are still kind of turned off on the team. And it's not just the losing, right? I think there is a lot on how the identity of this team has been formulated, how the roster build was done, how some people feel the front office has treated fans. And that's a real thing, that one win isn't necessarily going to wipe clean from the record. But I do think that it's okay, Jordan, to feel good about the result you saw on Saturday and take that in isolation for now, right?
Yeah,
it was a
I
great
agree.
game where 11 guys got on the pitch and they all looked like they had actually played together before, which has been a rarity this year, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
And John, just wanted to get your sort of thoughts on that.
Yeah, look, I'm as a cynical bastard as the next person. Don't get me wrong. So I'm like, if I'm a TFC fan, I'm not sort of like planning the parade route or like thinking that this is the beginning, the start of something new, and that this is the beginning of the turnaround. There's a lot of work to do here, both on and off the field, as you mentioned, Michael. But I would also think I would have, I'm not completely joyless, and I would, I would be able to sort of enjoy, this one moment of light in what has been a pretty dark and nightmarish campaign. So yeah, I think it has to be kept in perspective, no question about it. But I'd hate to go through life all doom and gloom and not be able to enjoy this and just say, well, it doesn't matter, they stink anyway, and there's no hope for for success. I mean, what kind of a way is that to go through life?
Well, I'll say this, and Jeff, you can probably back me up because you were close by me for the game. It had been the first time I've been at BMO Field really this year, maybe since the Inter Miami game, where I saw genuine happy people in the stands, like genuinely happy. Look, I think everybody realized the team has been garbage for most of the year.
That was your chant, I do believe.
Yeah, there's a chant for that. But I also think that for a Saturday, people were able to put that aside for just a moment and enjoy their team playing good football again, seeing the ideas in the passing and sort of the movement come together again. And for that 90 minutes, people were engaged, and it's to me, it's incredible that a season like this, and we're still getting the attendances that we're getting, that the supporters are still engaged the way that they're engaged, even though so many things, both on the pitch, off the pitch, have gone wrong, not just this season, but over the past 3 seasons in a lot of ways. And it's just, again, it speaks to, I think, although a lot of people call TFC Live and the culture a little toxic right now, and I get that. There definitely is that, for sure. But I also think there are a lot of people who are able to take some of this into perspective and know that brighter days could be ahead. I'm not saying it for sure. I'm not saying John Herdman's the savior. I'm not saying, this offseason everything's going to be fixed and we're back in playoff contention again. But for one sort of Saturday night at the National Exhibition, you got to see football that we kind of expected to see this season.
And you guys tell me, but wasn't it just fun to watch? Like, irrespective of the results and the nightmare season that they've had, wasn't it just fun to sort of watch them sort of play like that and really kind of go at Philadelphia and score 3 goals and like play with full of confidence? I mean, was entertaining to watch. And I can't remember the last time, I can say it was entertaining, to watch TFC. Like, been a long time.
Yeah.
So I think just from taking everything out of context, it was just a fun game to watch and a fun performance and a fun team.
Yep. I want to put a million asterisks on it, but I won't, because I will bask in the glow of happiness here before I go throw acid on my face and melt my skin off because of what Casey said a couple minutes ago that I'm still obsessing over. But
well, you do look really good right now, Jeff. I mean, let's just say your facial, the face is looking great tonight.
Really? Because
it's looking good.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, no, just all good vibes. All good vibes, guys. Honestly.
Absolutely. And with that, we will wrap up tonight's show. Thank you again for tuning in to another Toronto Till I Die episode. The TTID community is growing. Tell them how much you like our show by leaving a review or a thumbs up wherever you're getting our show. So if you are watching us right now live on YouTube, or you're watching a recording of this on YouTube, give us the big old thumbs up and subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, give us a review. And if you're on Spotify, drop us a few stars, preferably 5 if you are so inclined. But for Jeffrey P. Nesker, for John Molinaro, 5. Yeah, exactly. 5.
It's like we're on 10. American Idol. Just 5. Vote 5. Text 5. We win American Idol.
For Jeffrey P. Nesker, for John Molinaro, I'm Mike Newell. We'll see you all next week. Cheers, everybody.
And wait. And baby, I'm TFC till I die.